Daddy, he's calling you. All right, here we go. Pathwork Lecture number 8. Mediumship. Greetings. I bring you the blessings of God, my dear friends. I'm going to start over. Mediumship, how to contact God's spirit world. Lecture number 8. Greetings. I bring you the blessings of God, my dear friends. My dear friends, in my last lecture, I've spoken about passing through the first door on the way to perfection, about this decision, the surrender, unconditionally, and how the difficulties have to be overcome. Since this last lecture, I've observed my friends, or for us in the spirit world of God, it is a great joy to see that the first steps have been made, that this decision was made. And today, I will give you a few words about what happens thereafter. But I also want to say that we also see when friends who hear or read these words push them aside, thinking that they don't concern them, and they do not even want to try to take such decision into consideration. So this too is inscribed in the soul, and each one has to bear the consequences. There are also many friends who believe that they are long since on this path because they pray once in a while, because they make an effort to be decent human beings. I was not speaking of that at all. Such decisions is much more. And I want to tell these friends, not only those present, contemplate where you stand. Look at the possibility that you may not as yet be at the point where you want to believe you are. But whoever has made the decision and gives himself completely into God's hands will feel what is taking place inside. At first, there will be a great relief and an inner joy which will take a hold of him for a certain time. But I will say, sorry, it's summer and it's so hot. But I will say that it will not always remain this wonderful feeling. There is a danger that man somehow imagines, perhaps not directly, with specific thoughts or feelings, that when the burdens and the unpleasant things or the moods return, it is of no use anyhow. But this is not so. You are at the beginning, and after you have passed the first door, and I have told you often how then the work will begin. You are at the beginning after you have passed through the first door, and I have told you often how then the work will begin, what it will consist of. So don't become less active. Keep up your efforts in your spiritual work. That must be the price. And today, I will not discuss this subject as much because I have given you sufficient words in the past as to what to do to walk this path of perfection, of happiness and liberation. Today I will give you an outline. I have not yet spoken about this much. Okay, I just want you to know it is 100 degrees and our air conditioning is broken. I have given you sufficient words in the past as to what to do and how to walk this path of perfection, of happiness and liberation. And today I will give you an outline. I have not yet spoken about this much, of what beauty can be expected, You know about the difficult part. You know that it involves making and keeping resolutions, even if it seems difficult at times, never to slacken and always to overcome by making the time available and renewing the willpower continuously. Then, as time goes on, the beauty and the reward will be more and more felt. It will penetrate slowly through to you and not by sudden experience. When the spirit world of God observes that a human being takes such a decision, I don't know if I can continue, I'm so hot. When the spirit world of God observes that a human being takes such a decision with true sincerity, that it was not only a resolution, but that he makes an all-out true effort to progress and to realize the resolutions despite unavoidable setbacks and occasional failures, then he will at first receive increased spirit help. This is also a spiritual law. A human being who walks this path of light needs other spiritual help than the one who does not walk this path. Either an additional high and powerful spirit will be assigned, or there will be an exchange. That's interesting. The spirit who had thus far led this human being completed his assignment, did his duty, and brought this human being safely through the first door. Now the spirit can be given another task, and while the human being will be granted enforced protection and will feel it too, the guidance and the presence of such a more powerful spirit protection quite certainly. Of course, this may already have happened before he passes this specific door, because enforced spirit protection can be given a number of times progressively in the life of a human being, whenever an important test has been passed or a spiritual decision has been made, either before or after he passes through the door. So there are several crossroads in the human life. And by this I want to say that when one of you has already and distinctly felt an increased spiritual protection, it does not necessarily mean that you have already passed through the first door on the path of perfection. You should understand clearly what this path really is. It is the intensive, continuous work on your own development, on your self-recognition, accepting for the first time your own imperfections and absorbing the spiritual laws which then are incorporated in these imperfect feeling currents as time goes on. So if you do not work daily in this manner, with help and advice from the outside, for the time being, it cannot be done without it, you are not on this path. And I have to repeat this for certain friends again and again. So you need outside help. Furthermore, if man makes the effort, he will establish this contact with God's spirit world, and that is the point. He will receive distinct recognition and perception of God's spirit world, who show him his way. And these perceptions will then no longer be incoherent phenomena which may appear from time to time even before the door is passed through. But they are a clearly understandable part of the whole, whose connections, systems, and order man will comprehend better and better. He will thereby perceive more clearly how his spiritual path should continue, and how he must work, and where to start in each case, what the right alternatives in his life problems are, i.e., what God's will is, what the tests mean, and what sense and purpose they have on the very personal level. The latter part is of major importance and constitutes a turning point in man's life, because previously these tests and the minor or major trials did not make sense. What makes life more difficult, let me read that again. The latter part is of major importance and constitutes a turning point in man's life, because previously these tests and the minor or major trials did not make sense, which makes life more difficult. Now the veil is lifted, and thus man can remove the difficulties much easier. Furthermore, man will then also receive help in the material problems and difficulties, a help so far not had. I can tell you, my dear ones, the feeling of happiness, the joy, the victory, the inner liberation after each battle is won. It cannot be compared with anything else which man will ever experience. And since my teachings aim at making contact with the world of God's Spirit, since my teachings aim at making contact with the world of God's Spirit possible for each one of you, I will now specifically advise how this is to be started. If man truly progresses, then the contact will be established. One will hear, another one will see, another one will feel, or in many other ways, there are quite different ways how this contact can operate. And as you know, there are also human beings who have been born with this gift, even before they walk this path. And it is what you call mediumistic. And if a human being has such an innate force, I do not even want to say is blessed with it, it may be a great test, because if one has such a spiritual experience due to this innate force, not knowing what it is a great burden for him or her. A test. God's spirit world wants to say that it is an indicator for him so that he gains better access to God's reality and his spirit world, and thus to this path of perfection. And I don't want to say just his, it's just a habit. I don't think it's a sexual delineation in God's spirit world, but they say he. I could say her, but let's just say, I'm just saying he, but not meaning it in any particular patriarchal way. That was just my my butt in here. So God's spirit world wants to say that it is an indicator for him so that he gains better access to God's reality and his spirit world, and thus to the path of perfection. But frequently man does not understand and gets stuck with his head in the sand. And the more these forces operate, the manifestations appear, the unhappier he will become, because the more obstinate his attitudes are, the more the low forces will make use of him, a consequence of the law. And this is one possibility. The second possibility is that a human being knows of these things and thus uses his mediumistic ability, so to speak, on an entirely outer level without walking on the path of perfection himself. And such contact, as in the first case, is also a danger for the medium as well as for those who participate. So if, however, a human being, before such contact is established, walks on the path of perfection, of development, of self-recognition, discipline, humility, and crosses through the first door, and if he wants the contact at first for this one purpose alone, then this mediumistic ability will develop in a wonderful way. Of course, the same would hold true in the first two cases if the man would walk the path of perfection. Then there will be no tests of a certain category, as with a medium who believes to be Then there will be no tests of a certain category, as with a medium who believes to be able to help others without walking the path. Such a medium must suffer very specific trials, major tests of a certain kind. And I cannot go into detail now. This contact should have one purpose only: develop upwards. And when this is recognized, help will be given, and only then man can help others, and others can be helped through him. And I will revert later on to a question which one of our friends intends to raise and which fits nicely into this subject. When man has reached the point that he will receive answers to the questions relating to his development, then his faith will be strengthened tremendously. Where faith prior to that was still wavering, it will no longer waver. And now you will ask, how shall I start this? What should I do first on this path? What should I ask? And I say, this is different from each individual, for each individual, what to start out with. There may be a spiritual problem which blocks the way and which has to be removed first, something where man has a rigid prejudice, where he is not open to words from others, and then he should take this problem and ask for help here. But he will only receive an answer when he is sufficiently open to say to himself, I am ready, when it is God's truth, to accept this answer which I have resisted up until now. Such an openness must always be there, quite certainly, and it may take work, it may take willpower and time to attain this soul condition. Otherwise, I say, just start to think, where are my imperfections? Where are my faults? What is the worst fault that hinders my progress most? What are the faults which I have recognized so far, but about whose consequences and extent I did not yet render account of? And which faults do my friends and foes ascribe to me? How about the latter? Think about these points. Many times you will say, this is unjust. It is not true that I have this fault. And you may be right, but there may be and must be a bit of truth in it, even though it may be a different way that you were told than you took it. Contemplate with great honesty and with absolute desire to know the truth. The more resistance you feel, the more truth must be in it. My dear ones, there you will find the core of truth in these faults which others tell you that you have, but you yourself cannot see or admit them. Write the faults down so that you have them on black and white, so that they are fixated and cannot disperse again. And this helps very, very much. And with this, go to your personal spirit friends. Open yourself to receive an answer, deeper understanding and connections. And if you truly want to receive the truth answer, and you open yourself wide enough to be willing to hear what may be unpleasant, and if you say, Father, thy will be done. I want the truth about myself. I do not want to shy away in cowardice, vanity, or self-pity. Then, and then only, you will receive the truth. And there will be much more happiness when one inner truth is recognized, which you had at first resisted, because this will be more confirmation to you than an answer which pleases the ear. Because such a pleasing answer might lead you to say, this must be my own wish, and I hear what I actually want to hear, and the contact may be just my imagination. But if you realize something which you had resisted before, my dear ones, then you will clearly feel with the presence of your spirit friends that the other world which is doubted so much, the world which you cannot see or touch, it will stabilize your wavering faith. It is God's first answer, which can only be given when man is willing and makes the first step towards discipline. The reward is great because the stability and security which arises from the fact that you get personal answers and know the reality of God's spirit world by your own experience, your own enlightenment, by your own feeling, cannot be substituted by any word which you hear or read. These outer words are necessary, and they may be the push to make you do what is necessary. This should be the beginning of your path, and then you will notice everyday things that happen, details. And when you think about them from this point of view, and again, ask your spirit friends, help me to recognize the truth. What is the meaning and the purpose of this experience? Where does it fit in on my path of development? You will again receive answers. I have to warn you that you have to repeat every time when you open yourself, and not just mechanically as a routine, but you also want to hear what is unpleasant. And you want to hear what is unpleasant and built up enough strength to bear it. Okay, let me read that again because it's kind of confusing. I want to warn you that you have to repeat every time when you open yourself up, and not just mechanically as a routine, that you also want to hear what is unpleasant and built up enough strength to bear it. It is not sufficient to do this once, because truth cannot penetrate as long as a door is closed. And it is closed because you ready yourself every time to accept what is inconvenient and unflattering, whatever the truth may reveal. You will again receive the answer, be it by recognition, be it by inner knowing, be it that within a few days somebody is inspired to give you the answer. So this happens frequently. God's spirit world works also in this way. And this means keep your eyes and your ears open in this direction. Such answers may be connected with a little side test. It may also be a major test. And sometimes it involves that you learn the humility and modesty to be told something by another person, or even be open for it. If this test is passed, then there will again be the wonderful enlightenment of the deep recognition of spirit reality, as much as when the answer is given in a direct way. All this will no longer be words for you, but you will feel the wonderful system of guidance on this path more distinctly as time goes on. And this is the second step, my dear ones, which should also be undertaken. And I want to say, whoever continues on this path and thus gains a certain stability will one day be moved to feel the desire to give God something for it. And at first it may seem to you that a sacrifice is expected from you. Sacrifice of time, of discipline, of decision, which may not be hard each time, sacrifice to overcome that which is so difficult, etc. For the time being, you see only the burden, the price you have to pay, and what you have to give, while the resulting happiness is only a word that you don't know yet. But if you're willing, and you're willing to start paying the price, you will soon recognize that you will receive 100 times as much as you are willing to give. Of course, I know that these are just words. For those friends who are not yet that far, but remember these words, you will find them come true. And then you will be ready to offer your service to God, to help in the great plan. And here also you need only willingness, the how to leave, the willingness, the how, leave to God. But let me read that again, because that's, I think, a key. Then you will be ready to offer your services to God to help in his great plan. And here also you need only the willingness, the how to leave to God. Each one will be guided how to be of best of service. Each one will be guided how to be best of service. Then you will again experience that the readiness to help and serve no longer constitute a personal sacrifice after it materializes, but it will become the greatest personal joy which you can imagine. For two friends here, I see very specific tasks and services. With you, my friend, I see you will be willing to train mediums in this way. You will enable the medium to establish contact with God's spirit world and teach them the requirements, the conditions, and the effects of the laws. More and more mediumistic persons will be led to you and have already been led to you, or you to them. You will be able to help many to bring their services unto a higher level and work in the plan of salvation. It is a wonderful task that is waiting for you, but a few things have yet to fulfill. A few things have to be fulfilled yet. So in this connection, I want to say that the good that has been created already by certain mediums to convince certain circles of the reality of the world of spirit will by no means be diminished by contact with God's spirit world. Instead, it brings spirits closer to earth, because such kind of proof as skeptical human beings wanted can also be given, even though in a different way. So by God's spirit world with other conditions, and man has to accept that he cannot choose how proof is given. When man is willing to wait and be patient, and this can be explained to the skeptics, then the proof that is given by God's spirit world, spirits joined in the higher places, is incomparably more effective and of longer duration than the proof that is given by less evolved spirits, which may be very impressive at the moment, but the force dispels. And in many places it is believed that skeptics can only be convinced when spirits, which are still closer to the earth, are brought in and fascinate man in their own way. But it must not be so. Science, too, could gain more if man would not force their conditions on spirit, but accept the conditions of the world of spirit, and this is not so very difficult. Man must only be enlightened about the variety in the condition and about the spirit laws and how they work. Furthermore, I see another task for you, my friends. I see that the task which waits for you is that you, at first quite slowly, will recognize man's aura. And in the beginning, it may manifest just once in a while and somewhat nebulous, only a part of the picture. But when you cultivate it, take care of it, make something of these perceptions instead of disregarding them, then this gift will develop, and you will not only see the various colors of the aura, but also certain sketchy forms, because man's aura is formed in various ways, and these signs can partly be seen by others. Thus, the aura may reveal sickness or soul trends or thoughts not spoken. But all this has yet to be learned, and you will receive help if you ask for it, my friend. Now you will rightly ask, so what's the purpose? Nothing is given that has no purpose. The purpose is that you may receive later on physical healing forces. When you then recognize the aura of a person, you may find that the mark of sickness in it and know what that sickness is, and you would then also receive the healing force to heal it. And yes, such a wonderful task may be ours, may be yours. And I will say, God in his wisdom is so wonderful that this would not only bring greatest happiness, but it also would not at all impair the fulfillment of earthly duties. Wow, that is so intense. Let me read that again. I will say, God in his wisdom is so wonderful that this would not only bring greatest happiness, but it also would not at all impair the fulfillment of earth duties. Trust and let yourself be guided. Just leave it to God. I beg you, learn in every aspect. Where must I let myself be guided? Where must I act myself? And this you can also ask your personal spirit friends. These two messages were given to me. I was allowed to convey them. Other such messages will be given, be it by me or by other personal contacts. And those who did not receive a personal word should not think, why not I? Everything is good, has its good reasons. Trust me also in this, though you may not always be able to understand the reasons. But all of you try to establish this contact with the spiritual world, with the world of spirit. All of you try to establish contact with the world of spirit. It is possible for each human being, for everyone. Or do you believe that God has created this contact for only a certain human beings? No. Man's conscious and unconscious urge and aim is certainly in its entirety to penetrate the density of matter. What is your technical progress? Contemplate it. Actually, it is nothing else than to overcome matter. It is nothing else than to overcome matter. Each technical gain is only overcoming matter, which is a hindrance for you, only that techniques use outer forces and man on the path uses inner forces. And this is the difference. But the inner forces are incomparably more effective. I'm going to do one question. And now I will answer a question as well as I can. Question: I would like to ask you why it has been made so difficult in our time to establish contact with God's spirit world. Answer: the contact with the spirit world in general has not been made difficult, but man prevents it. He prevents it by his whole attitude. Most human beings do not believe in this. They are not open for it. And the mediumistic forces which slumber in many human beings who could be used for it, it remains latent. But what you perhaps mean is not only a contact with the outer world, but more specifically with God's spirit world. And such contact was always more difficult to be granted just so easily, without battling for it, just offhand. Of course, God's spirit world must test and test such a medium to see whether he or she is worthy and capable. Such a medium must not only be morally unobjectionable, but have the highest principles, but also have a free and relaxed soul. There are still quite a few human beings who meet their first requirements, men who are good and of goodwill to help others, even are willing to walk this path of perfection. But there are many, many who don't go through all the way, who get stuck somewhere along the line and in a fault which is not recognized and thus cannot be overcome. And it is a great temptation for a medium who has already reached a certain step and some success to get caught up in certain pride and not be able to conquer it nor be able to master it. Absolute humility is also one of the requirements. How difficult it will get for a medium not to identify with the spirit that manifests and then exalt himself over others. Many, or quite a number, therefore reach a certain point successfully and then they get stuck. As I said in my lecture today, nobody can help others he says today in the lecture, nobody can help others who himself is not rooted in the path of perfection in the most active way. Examine all the mediums whom you know from this viewpoint. Most of them will say that they pray, that they make efforts to be decent human beings, but they do not continuously develop in the sense that is required. They do not heal the sick currents of the soul, which more or less are present in every human being, because each unrecognized, unconscious, emotional movement, each unrecognized fault, which is not battled, each prejudice is a block for God's spirit world to break through. It is not being allowed. Because the human being would not deserve it. No, the channel is not clean enough. Wow, that's interesting. Whatever is unrecognized in man and deviates from the spiritual laws is like a block that we cannot penetrate. And every stubborn opinion is such a block. We cannot get through to the truth when man is not opened for it in such a way that the opposite of man's opinion, if it were the truth, could not also penetrate. I do not even speak of the basic requirements that a medium must place on his or her gift only under God's will, not requesting any personal advantages of material or spiritual nature. Thus there exists hardly a faultless and perfect instrument, because even a human being who meets the requirements as best as possible deviates somewhere, if only in a detail from the law, and then there is already a block for us. It is very, very, very difficult to make this clear to you, because everything spiritual, the movements, the feelings, the thoughts, are air for you. But for us, they are solid forms, and sometimes, therefore, walls made of granite. If, however, a medium meets the requirements to a great extent, if the medium continues to develop, not thinking that the goal has been reached, that is not possible, then these minor blocks, it's not possible to reach a goal. So we're always on the path, we're always learning. Then these minor blocks are not important. We can construct, so to speak, around it. It may be used also as a test for the human beings. Each test is meant as a healing agent for the soul. Boy, that's sort of nice to hear, isn't it? Each test is meant as a healing agent for the soul if it is passed. When a certain level is attained, these inner blocks, due to the still existing imperfections of the medium, will never prevent the human beings, neither the medium nor the participants, to break through to the truth in order to attain perfection. I'm going to read that again. I kind of messed it. When a certain level is attained, these minor blocks, due to the still existing imperfections of the medium, will never prevent the human beings, neither the medium nor the participants, to break through to the truth in order to attain perfection. This is the only God, God, I'm having trouble speaking. This is the only goal of God's spirit world, the only reason why such a contact can and should exist. It is to attain the truth in order to attain perfection. And that is lecture 8.